My name is Carlisle Carter. I'm the CEO and president of the 3C2A, and I'd like to welcome all convention delegates, representatives of affiliate organizations, and members of the board of directors to the 21st 3C2A annual convention. The theme of this year's convention is Pathways to Success. That, along with our association tagline, providing opportunities and fulfilling dreams, captures the essence of what the 3C2A is all about. Students come to us from across the country and the world because of the multiple pathways to success that the 3C2A provides, as well as the community college system in California. Many by choice, but more importantly, for many that have no other choice, no other opportunities in higher education. That truly is the beauty of our system and our association. Later today, we will celebrate those successes by honoring our scholar athletes and scholar teams and 3C4A award winners. To officially open this year's convention, I have the privilege of introducing our keynote speaker, Amy Perko, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Knight Commission on Intercollegiate Athletics. Amy has led the Knight Commission since 2005, serving as Executive Director until October of 16, when she was named Chief Executive Officer. During Amy's tenure, the NCAA has adopted a number of the Knight Commission recommendations. The most prominent of these actions include requiring teams to be on track to graduate 50% of their players to be eligible for postseason championships, reducing athletic time demands on college athletes, and revising the revenue distribution to include incentives for academic outcomes. The Knight Commission recommended all of these actions in its June 2010 report, Restoring the Balance, Dollars, Values, and the Future of College Sports. Having served in various leadership positions in sports for more than 20 years, Amy is a recognized leader on college sports issues. In January 2012, she received the NCAA's prestigious Silver Anniversary Award, which is given to honor 6 former college athletes on the occasion of their 25th anniversary from college participation in recognition of their civic and professional contributions. Amy worked at the NCAA for more than 6 years, and then at the University of Kansas as the Associate Athletics Director and Senior Woman Administrator, where she served on several Big 12 conference and NCAA committees. In 2001, she was the first team president named by the National Basketball Association for one of its men's basketball development teams, the Fayetteville Patriots. It's an amazing career, and we're honored to have CEO Amy Perko.
Thanks, Carlisle, and it's great to be here with you this morning. I live on the East Coast, and so it's great to be on the West Coast, and I'm actually going to LA for a panel discussion on Friday, so this West Coast swing has worked out nicely. But it's great to be with all of you. I want to kind of get a feel for the audience here in terms of your participation in sport, in community college sport, at four-year colleges. So I'll just ask you to raise your hand. A couple questions. It kind of helps me get a feel for who's in the room. But how many of you participated in college sport at a community college? Okay, a lot of. How many participated in college sport at a four-year college? Okay, great. How many of you want Loyola Chicago to win the national championship? Wow, not as many people. How many of you want Kansas to win the national championship? It's a split crowd. I think we've got I think we've got them all in the corners here. But I'm really excited to be here today to celebrate the work of the California Community College Athletic Association in providing your pathways to success for thousands of community college students every year. I also look forward to celebrating with you the accomplishments of the scholar athletes. I think I was on the elevator with one of them last night working out. He was working out at 11 o'clock. I was just getting in. But, you know, as Carlisle said, a lot of the work that I've done has really been focused on NCAA Division I. But, you know, really, regardless of what level of intercollegiate athletics we're working in, we all share the same fundamental belief about the value that college sports and participation in college sports brings to athletes in providing educational and developmental opportunities through sport. You know, this is truly a unique American model, whether it's at an NCAA Division I school or a California community college institution. But this unique American model of integrating sports and academics is really under fire right now at a number of different levels. From scandals in the pay-for-play debate in the high-profile Division I to, you know, just frankly, financial strains at institutions with lower resources. But I believe this model is really worth preserving. And so this morning I want to share some thoughts with you about some things the Knight Commission has done to help what we feel is realigning college sports with its core mission, and also to share some thoughts about the values that we believe should be guiding any institution at any level in their conduct of providing these wonderful opportunities for young men and women. So, you know, we can certainly make a case for why this integrated model of sports and academics does work. And in fact, research supports the great value of athletics participation. 2 years ago, there was a survey that was done by, it's called the Purdue Gallup survey, and it was done by Gallup. And that survey showed, it measured basically all college graduates, and the survey itself is really looking at the value of college. So the big study was about college graduates and how college graduates help individuals later in their life. And they look at several different metrics, and those 5 metrics were purpose, social, community, physical, and financial. So how are these college graduates doing as compared to non-graduates in those areas? So they took that big survey and then they broke out, let's look at athletics. How are college graduates who are athletes doing compared to non-athletes? And what they found was that athletes were performing better than non-athletes in 4 of those 5 areas. The only area that they were not performing better was in financial, and they were about the same. So again, research showed that there was something intrinsic in their participation that helped them later in life on those metrics of well-being. One of the most important things as well that I think came out of that study was it showed that there were 2 primary factors that contributed to college graduation among athletes and their successful academic experience. One was, and this is for all college graduates, not just athletes, one was participation in an extracurricular activity, and 2 was having at least 1 mentor. So when you look at those 2 factors, participation in an activity where you're involved, you belong, and having a mentor, we know, sitting here in this room, that college sports provides that for our students. And, you know, how many of you are coaches? We've got about a third of the room are coaches, and those of you who are not coaches, I'm sure, work with coaches in the way that and influence them in the way they perform their jobs. But I think, you know, coaches understanding the role that they have as mentors and being one of the 2 primary factors to really building and supporting this pathway to success is absolutely essential. And that may be the most important thing, you know, I say this morning, but while I could cite some other research, but I did want you to make you aware of that because I think it's important as we look at, what is this value that we have in college sport. But I think we all can also cite personal stories that also show the value and why this model is worth preserving. My own stories, I grew up in North Carolina, played basketball in my driveway, and dreamed of playing in the ACC. So that was, my first experience in having a goal and working toward that goal. And I was fortunate to receive an academic and athletic scholarship at Wake Forest and had a great experience there. And certainly that experience included learning, lessons in the classroom and lessons on the court, lessons that I'm sure we all have experienced as athletes and former athletes, lessons in preparation and teamwork, lessons in perseverance and in self-motivation, and lessons in, frankly, handling disappointment, but also in handling success. So certainly my education and development through varsity sports and the benefits are shared by more than 500,000 students at four-year colleges, community colleges, junior colleges, every single year. And those experiences are examples of the gains that our institutions have when students have experience that represent the very best of this unique model. And that is creating outcomes that are central really to institutions' missions of developing human potential. And that's really, at the core what we're talking about. That's our institution's mission of developing human potential. As Carlisle said in the introduction, I've been fortunate to work with the Knight Commission on Intercollegiate Athletics. And I want to share a little bit, as I said, of some of the things that we've done in the past that we think have helped make the college athletic experience better for students and for institutions. In this group, just to give you a little bit of background, I'm often asked, Knight Commission, does that have something to do with Bobby Knight? Are you named after Bobby? Well, how about Phil Knight? Is he funding you? No, it's not Bobby Knight or Phil Knight, but it's the Knight Foundation, the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation. And the group was founded actually in 1989 by two university presidents, the late Bill Friday and the late Theodore Hesburgh. Bill Friday was then president of the North Carolina system, and Hesburgh was then president at Notre Dame. And these men were giants in higher education. And they were basically spurred by low graduation rates among football and basketball players, and some very high-profile scandals that damaged the public trust in college sports. When I'm talking with college students a little bit about the history, I always say, have you watched the 30 for 30 on SMU? And they usually have, so that kind of brings them up to date on some of the history of what the times were like during that time. So the goal of the commission was to promote a reform agenda to emphasize the educational mission of college sports and to restore the public trust. So the commission released a report in 1991 that really became viewed as a landmark report, and it was embraced by university presidents. And it really created a roadmap for reforming college sports. And it led to important academic reforms, raised academic standards, and established some systems of accountability. But despite that initial progress of putting presidents in charge and strengthening academic standards, there were and continue to be concerns about the commercial excesses and the escalating demands on college athletes that have existed and increased over time. Over the past 2 decades, we've continued to promote changes to really reclaim the educational purpose of college sports. And a little bit later, I'll share some challenges that, are currently presenting itself. But first, I want to go to, some of the values that we think should be guiding the NCAA conferences and institutions. And as I said, these values apply, to community colleges as well. And the first is priority of education. The second, imperative of athletes' health, safety, and well-being. The third, financial responsibility. And 4 is integrity. With regard to the focus on academics, we've been guided by 2 principles, and they're listed there. Treat athletes like students first. And then the second is align the competitive and financial incentives with educational values. In the introduction, Carlisle mentioned two successes that we've had, and these were recommendations that we made first in 2001. 2001 was the first time, and the commission said, you know, playing for a championship is the pinnacle. So in order to play for a championship, institutions should first meet academic standards and their academic obligations. So teams should have to be on track to graduate half their players to be eligible for March Madness and any postseason championships. The second recommendation was there's a lot of money in the system, and for March Madness in particular, the NCAA should realign its financial incentives to include financial rewards for meeting academic success and academic outcomes, and in turn reduce some of the rewards that are provided for winning games in the tournament. So these suggestions were met, as you might imagine, with initial resistance. There was some progress in putting forth a system that did ban teams from the NCAA tournament after several successive years of low graduation rates, extremely low graduation rates. But again, we felt that that standard was just much too low, and we strongly pushed for this strict threshold for academic, this strict academic threshold for postseason eligibility. And just to give you an idea of some of the resistance that we faced, you know, one example, when we pushed for this again in 2010, a reporter at USA Today asked a prominent basketball coach, what do you think about this 50% threshold for postseason eligibility? And this Hall of Fame basketball coach said, well, that's completely nuts, and I quote. So pushing for these kind of things has not been easy, but we've been persistent, and the University of Presidents adopted the rule in 2011, and it was celebrated as putting a stake in the ground that academic success must be paramount, and that change has made a positive difference. As this slide shows, this is a slide that shows some of the impact of the work that we've been fortunate to do with others in helping to make change. Using the NCAA's graduation success metric, more than 85% of Division I college athletes successfully complete their academic experience. The graduation rates, however you measure them, are higher than they've ever been before. And as noted in the second box, you know, the 50% graduation rate standard is and has been in effect since 2011. You know, we face similar resistance to the idea of changing the money. This wonderful tournament that we're all enjoying creates over $800 million annually. Much of that money is distributed back to the institutions. And so our suggestion was, you know, the way the NCAA breaks out the money, 40% of that was given back to conferences and then to the schools based on the men's basketball success in the tournament. And we said, we feel like that's just way too much money riding on how you do in the tournament. Why not, let's put some academic incentives in the system, and let's reduce the amount awarded for winning. Again, that was met with resistance, but two years ago the NCAA did adopt that, and they are phasing in academic incentives. So you can see in the third box here, by phasing in these academic incentives over the lifetime of this CBS or the media contract with the NCAA, more than $1 billion will be awarded to institutions for meeting academic outcomes. It's amazing what small percentages can do with $800 million. So, you know, there has been progress, and I want to take a look at these values again and look at some of the other things that need to change, as well as some of the areas that I think apply again to how you conduct your programs at the community college level. First, one of the guiding values, priority of education. Obviously, the educational experience must be paramount. You know, whether meeting NCAA standards or the 3C2A standards, it's important for our leaders to remember that coaches and athletes are driven by goals and benchmarks, and They always rise to the occasion to meet those. To ensure that athletes truly have the time to devote to their academics, the Knight Commission has, again, successfully suggested in the NCAA level that athletic time demands be reduced. You know, I don't know if that's an issue at all at your institutions. The NCAA did conduct surveys with athletes and received feedback, and really as a result of those surveys, some important policies were put into place last year. Some that, you know, require 8-hour dead periods, in fact, because athletes were complaining about late night practices and then early morning workouts and just the lack of sleep. So there are some regulations that, you know, again, have the goal of protecting the athletes and really emphasize, too, on that priority of the health, safety, and well-being. So another area that I want to mention to this group as it relates to the priority of education is that the Commission has recommended this as well for NCAA schools, that we would like to see more incentives and standards developed that emphasize coaches' roles as educators. Coaches are so important, as you know was mentioned earlier, in their roles as mentors to the success of athletes. And as sports have grown more popular, fewer coaches arrive at their professions through an educational and teaching background. You know, there are youth sports associations and state high school associations that are doing really wonderful things in terms of training and coaching licenses and health and safety education. And frankly, some of what's being done in those areas is more than what's required of a Division I head coach. So, you know, and again, some coaches associations have very sophisticated standards of coaching licenses and others don't. In fact, the more prominent sports of football and basketball really don't have some of those types of development standards that some of the other coaches associations have. So we would like to see more being done in terms of investing in the training and development of coaches. You know, on a personal note, I would recommend, if you all haven't heard of, I know everyone's always looking for great resources on teaching leadership as well as resources for coaches, but I would recommend Growing Leaders in Any Work done by Tim Elmore. He has a book, Generation IY, Secrets to Connecting with Today's Teens and Young Adults in the Digital Age. And that group is doing a lot of work with institutions on how do we communicate with this generation that now has an attention span that's less than a goldfish. And that's been empirically shown, so this is just not an anecdote, unfortunately. So again, you know, I think in the meetings I've attended, and I've attended Coaches Association meetings, you know, all coaches across all levels, including me as a parent coach, are struggling with how do I best communicate with this generation that was raised differently than I was raised. But again, I think we all share this this belief that participation in athletics is just a wonderful opportunity for developing leaders, developing human potential, developing leaders. The co-chair of the Knight Commission is Arnie Duncan, and he is the former U.S. Secretary of Education. And he has said that only the military, in his view, only the military provides a better training ground in developing leaders than participation in athletics. So again, what a wonderful experience that we have in communicating how certain experiences in athletics really translate to what we will need in our adult lives to be successful in other areas of life. So the second value, again, is the imperative of health, safety, and well-being. You know, this is the area that, frankly, I think has changed the most in the past 5 years, and I expect will be driving many changes at every level of college sports. Concussions and the research around CTEs have certainly heightened this imperative of athlete health, safety, and wellness. The NCAA's Chief Medical Officer, Brian Hainline, has provided tremendous leadership in developing what is really a transcendent vision and plan for the NCAA to be the stewards of best practices for athlete health and safety in youth and in intercollegiate sport at all levels. So they're producing research and initiatives that are not just for NCAA schools, they're for community college, they're for youth sport. And one of the top priorities of that institute is to research and help in the treatment of concussion and in helping institutions with their concussion protocols. Since 2014, the NCAA has invested over $27 million in concussion research and will commit $2 million moving forward. I believe later this year they're going to be releasing a number of research papers that will provide more information about what their concussion research is showing. The other top priorities include cardiac health, mental health, doping, and substance abuse, and the impact of early sports specialization and its impact on overuse injuries. So related to health and safety, again, I come back to coaches because one of the priorities is to make sure coaches are better trained with regard to health and safety issues, including the mental health of athletes and their relationship and their impact of their relationship with college athletes in this area. So I noticed that on your schedule later today, you have a session on mental health, and I applaud you for doing that. You know, the NCAA is doing more work on mental health than ever before. You know, in fact, just last week, my daughter plays travel basketball, and we were signing her up to participate in a tournament where NCAA college coaches will be present. And I don't know if you know this process, but basically those kind of tournaments have to be certified. So in order to be certified, the athletes participating in them have to check off a number of things, and one of those, they had a module for the athletes to watch on mental health. So that has recently been added this year. And again, that's a resource that would apply, you know, to any athlete, high school, anywhere. But I thought it was a wonderful part of the process, and was very well done. So, athlete health and safety. The third one is fiscal responsibility. There must be a greater financial responsibility to ensure that athletics revenues are being used to support those primary values of academics and health and safety. And, you know, I know that we're talking about very different levels of resources when I show you some of these next slides that show some of the challenges in NCAA, but also the opportunities in some areas where we're trying to apply some pressure so that some of these revenues are used for the greater good of college sports at every level. So again, this slide is really just to show you some of the challenges at the NCAA Division I level, but again, the opportunities. This slide, you know, the Power 5 conferences, the high profile, they tend to drive the public perception of college sports, and we know it's very different at your level than what is at the Power 5. Things have changed vastly in the past decade, and one of the reasons is due to changes really in two revenue sources. This slide shows three revenue sources: the NCAA distributions to those conferences and schools, the college football playoff distributions to those conferences and schools, and their media revenues, things like the Pac-12 network, the Big Ten network. So you can see in 2005, the combined total for these 5 conferences from just those 3 revenue streams, not ticket sales, not sponsorship, none of those institutionally managed revenues, was $570 million. In 2015, that jumped up to over $2 million. And in 2020, conservative projections are it'll be $2.7 billion. Did I say 2 million? $2 billion.
We knew what you meant.
Yeah.
We knew it.
$2 billion in 2050. There's a big difference, obviously, so I don't want to misstate that. $2 billion in 2015. So, you know, obviously that's more money than the NCAA generates, double the money the NCAA generates through its March Madness tournament. And I wanted to show you this slide because, you know, again, the public perception of college sports is driven by this, and we know college sports is very different at all different levels. But this is really at the heart of the debate of all the lawsuits, all the columns about the future of major college football and basketball, and whether the current model presents a fair deal to the athletes. So, you know, and there will be more to say about that, but, you know, as you know, this March Madness tournament, in fact, March Madness tournament really captures the imagination of the American public because of the Cinderella story. And, you know, it's such a diverse association. We have schools participating with $5 million budgets, competing against schools with $185 million budgets. And in fact, the semifinal matchup between Loyola and Michigan is a pretty good example. You know, Loyola's $13 million budget for its entire athletics program, and Michigan's is $153 million. And actually, Michigan spends about, I think, $8 million on its men's basketball program, so it's pretty close to, not too far off from Loyola's entire athletics program. But anyway, this March Madness obviously is the glue that holds this very diverse association together. And obviously there are tensions that come along with that. So this is an area that the Knight Commission has made some proposals to change the college football playoff. A lot of folks don't understand that the college football playoff is managed separately than the NCAA. The NCAA does not control it. It's controlled by the major conferences. And this shows basically they receive over $430 million a year. The majority of that money, the $255 million, goes back to those 5 conferences. And this shows how that money in the college football playoff is distributed. Again, the majority goes to those Power 5 conferences, also known as autonomy conferences. They have a little more autonomy in rules. They do have some academic performance bonus money. They also give bonus money based on football performance, which teams are in the semifinals, and then some others. But the areas where there shows a minus in the left-hand column and then plus, those are areas that we've suggested be changed. The Knight Commission has suggested be changed. In the 2 plus areas, we've basically said, let's take a really, really small portion of this more than $430 million received annually and put some of that football-related revenues toward concussion research and football-related health and safety initiatives. And let's also put some of this money toward improving diversity in athletics leadership, particularly in coaching, because that's another area of priority. I wanted to mention that because this, again, is what we see as an opportunity, but it's also a challenge because they're not going to do it. So it just shows, again, that there's a lot of money in the system, but, you know, some of that money's already been spent because these schools also hold over $8 billion in athletics debt on facilities. So just one other slide to show you again one slide on diversity. This has been a focus of the NCAA in terms of increasing diversity. We have other data like this on our website with regard to administrators and basketball, but I wanted to show this one since we were talking about football. And the takeaway, it tracks the diversity and racial and gender diversity among coaches and athletes in FBS football. So the first bar and column over here is head coaches. In the middle, it's assistant coaches. And then athletes. The blue bar is white male. The green bar is black male. And then other is the orange. So you can see the majority of the athletes are athletes of color. And when you look at the head and assistant coaches, it shows that there's obviously a lot of work to be done in improving the diversity among coaches. And again, we're hopeful that in the future more resources and can be devoted toward developing the pipelines and doing some other things to create some positive change in that area. And, you know, I don't know what, I'd be interested in the 3C2A and how that looks, but I think, you know, the more data that we can look at and see how we're doing and and look at those kind of things. It's always helpful. So the final, again, guiding value is integrity. Integrity must be a guiding value in the way that we conduct our programs on campus and in the governance of our associations. You know, we were encouraged when the NCAA changed its governing board to include athletes. There's a seat for an athlete on the governing board, and athletes are now included in the working committees. And that's been a positive change. You know, unfortunately, the lack of integrity by some programs and because of other changes that really need to be made that are more sweeping in nature. College basketball is in the crosshairs of an FBI investigation. I'm sure all of you have read or seen stories and reports about this. But the alleged criminal activities, along with other high-profile scandals, have once again damaged the public trust in big-time college sports. NCAA President Mark Emmert met with our commission last fall, and he cited an NCAA poll that showed 80% of the American public think universities care more about money than their athletes. You know, that result is clearly disappointing, and it's one that tends to paint, unfortunately, all intercollegiate athletics with that same broad brush. Major change is coming for college basketball, and the changes proposed really show how every layer of sport impacts the other. You know, I think some of the changes that are being discussed and that we'll see will range from changes to the professional NBA draft eligibility rule to changes with the way coaches interact with youth sport coaches. So again, it's not just changes in college. It's going to have to be changes at the pro level and changes at the youth level as well. And during it, I'm going to wrap up here shortly, and if we have some Q&A time, I'll be glad to talk a little bit more about that if you have any questions. But, you know, in closing, I wanted to share two comments that have stuck with me. And these comments, I think, really underscore this wonderful opportunity that we're all engaged in providing these educational opportunities for our students. You know, earlier I mentioned NCAA Chief Medical Officer Brian Hainline. He made a presentation to the Knight Commission in 2014 about what the NCAA was going to do in this space of health and safety. In that presentation, though, he offered, and he's a former athlete, tennis player, but he offered, you know, that no matter how safe we make sport, there's going to be a 10% chance of injury, including concussion. So he posed this question. He said, you know, when you consider that, why do we even encourage sport? Why don't we just tell our students to exercise? It's an interesting question. But his response, you know, was powerful and it was personal. And I think it's something that all of us as athletes have experienced. And he said, sport, unlike exercise, takes you to a place where you go right to the edge of a cliff. And it's at that edge of a cliff where you come to understand your creative soul. You learn how to fall down. You learn how to pick yourself up. You learn how to lose with grace, and you learn how to win with grace. You certainly learn a lot about yourself, and it certainly helps you in other areas of life. But that response, to me, highlights the powerful developmental opportunity that we have in providing these sports opportunities to our students. The second comment is a guide, I think, for all of us as we work to do just that. And this is from a book. One of our members of the commission is Scott Cowan. He's a president emeritus at Tulane University. And he just released a book titled Winnebagos on Wednesdays: How Visionary Leaders Can Transform Higher Education. So President Cowan told me about this book, and or he sent me something, and I immediately thought, Winnebagos on Wednesdays, I don't get it. So you have to look it up, right? So the title is very intriguing, and it comes from his experience with a successful football coach at Tulane who was offered, you know, a job at another school, and even a much higher salary was not going to retain that coach. And that coach explained to President Cowan he wanted to be at a school where the football team was so good fans would line up their Winnebagos on Wednesday for the Saturday game. And so it was at that point that President Cowan wondered, how have we gotten into the entertainment industry? In his book, Cowan argues that our community college and universities can rise to great heights if we get two things right: a strong sense of mission, and most importantly, leadership. So again, I think all of you have such important roles in providing opportunities for community college students to develop, again, their human potential. And I applaud this association for your mission in providing these opportunities, the open enrollment, and just the wonderful history this association has, starting with Jackie Robinson, on through, again, the thousands who may not have gone on to great accolades, but who certainly have had life-changing experience because of the work that each of you do. So thank you, and I'll be glad to take any questions.
Amy, why don't I start off? Clearly, the numbers are uniquely different at our level, but the issues are the same. And I want to applaud our board for addressing those issues by establishing some committees: the Health and Wellness Committee, which is underway, the Equity Inclusion Committee, which is underway. The board has commissioned a student-athlete survey that will be coming up in the next year, that will be looking at what factors influence their academic success. So I think our board has a pulse on some of the major issues. We also have an academic scorecard, which is finding the same things, regardless of the level, that in fact our student athletes outperform the non-student athlete population almost across the board through ethnicity, et cetera. So I think you can take comfort in taking this message back to the Knight Commission that regardless of the level, the issues are the same and they're being addressed. But our board, I think, has taken an active role in moving the 3C2A in the right direction. So that, I think, is important.
That's great. Thank you.
If you have a question, you could step to the mic and make sure we're heard. Thank you.
They knew I was going to the mic. My name is Evans Roderick. I'm from Mount San Antonio Community College. I was past president of the 3C4A, and Tony Thompson is the current president. I applaud you. I'm very familiar with the Knight Commission and Greg Dana and Diane Dickman, all the people that helped us in the academic arena. And we have Jen Bilson, one of our academic counselors, on the Relations Committee, and with Carlisle and other folks. I've been in the business about 47 years, a coach and an academic counselor. My kids went to Mount SAC, they graduated, they went on to play sports. I got grandkids coming through the system. What bothers me the most, and I've sat at tables in Savannah, Georgia, when they talked about 40, 60, 80. And they talked about whatever the school accepts is what's transferable. We at our level, we get these kids, they don't know their career choice, they don't know their major, and they don't know where they want to transfer to. They want a scholarship. We have the high schools they're in the same situation. They want a scholarship and they don't know where they're going. But they have a clear path. 16 core classes, graduate, test score. The AA degree is not the answer. And I know the 2-year college presidents and the 4-year college presidents, they had a situation where they had a deal. The AA degree is not the way to measure a 2-year college academic success. Because the only person in the world that needs an AA degree to transfer is a non-qualifier going to Division I. We need to have a better system of measuring. Kids come to our school, we have so many AA degrees. We don't have an AA degree that equivalent to every major. So they want an AA degree because that's what's required. and they take courses in that AA degree. And then in their last semester, they want to be a business major. There's no way in you know what.
Right.
They're going to meet that 40%.
Right.
And so they go to the school because that's where they can get in with that major. They think they can change their major every other day at the next level. And they get shepherded into majors that they really don't want. We have got to come up with a system of quality courses, 48, 50, whatever it is, that transfer just about everywhere. At the 4-year, they say all the time, we want the 2-year college athlete to look like the junior at the 4-year level. That ain't never going to happen. When that freshman transferring from high school goes to Notre Dame or wherever, and they don't know what their major is either. They might or might not. But they're going to be at the same school. They didn't go to that school to transfer in 2 years. They want to graduate from that school. So I just want, to look at that. It's a huge problem. Thank you very much for everything you've done, and I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. Obviously, I was making some notes here, and the whole transfer, I know your comments are with regard to the community college, to the 4-year level, and I will talk with the NCAA folks, and I think one thing that's been happening, and it's been done in the past, but now data is driving everything, and so, I think there are things that they can look at, and I think the quality courses issue versus, the AA degree is definitely a good suggestion. I will mention, one of the big controversies right now, just that the NCAA is going to have to battle out over the next couple months, is just how they handle transfers within the institutions. As you all probably know, football and basketball, if you transfer, you have to sit out for a year of residence, academic year, before you're eligible in that sport. And other sports have what's called a one-time transfer exception. And they're looking to revamp that and really, because of concerns that how can we legally justify treating athletes in other sports differently. So they're looking at it from a principle of, if what we're doing is academics, how can we tie it to, an academic metric? And so there's a proposal of, if you transfer and have a certain GPA over a certain amount, then you could be immediately eligible. And there's research that shows, the number that do transfer and they have that GPA, and it's over 80% likely they're going to graduate. So they're looking at those things, but then there's another proposal that says, let's just treat everyone the same, and everybody has to have a year of residence, academic year of residence, in order to be eligible. As you all know, with everything, there's unintended consequences, and you never make everyone happy on those things. And so the biggest difference with football and basketball is most of those individuals are receiving full scholarships during their year of residence. But men's soccer player, men's baseball player, women's soccer, they're maybe getting, a third scholarship or maybe 20%. And so you're going to say to that person, okay, sit out for a year before you compete. So as with that, there's no easy answer for sure. But thank you so much for providing that feedback. Any other questions? Comments? Well, great. You have a full agenda, and really applaud your work and applaud the things you're doing, Carlisle, and thank you for allowing me to be here to share these thoughts this morning.
And as usual, we have a few parting gifts. Thank you very much for your presentation, coming all the way out to California from North Carolina. We know it's those of us who have gone east know that it's, not an easy thing to get to. But getting out to the Bay, and thank you for bringing spectacular weather. That wasn't here until yesterday. So we really appreciate that, and really want to applaud what you've talked about today. Thank you.
Thank you.
That ends this session. And those of you, you have your program. So we have a number of sessions throughout the day. Want to applaud our affiliate orgs for their professional development type sessions that they have coming, and also bringing in some guests in that. So feel free to take a look at your schedule. And thank you all. We look forward to seeing you at our Scholar Athlete Luncheon later this morning. Thank you.